Welcome to the AI Meetup. We're going to talk about Agentic Web today. I'm Tim May. I host the AI Meetup, and I'm going to give this presentation. I have given this presentation at the last Henderson Tech Alley, and what we found was that the presentation was short, the conversation was long. I love those kinds of presentations. So this is going to be a very interactive presentation. So I'm going to whistle through the first part of the presentation, and we're going to open it up for discussion. And that's where the fun part starts, right? So we will get to just dive in and talk about it. So what is the Agentic Web? This is a term that Sam Altman used the other day for what I was calling Web 4.0. In other words, it's an evolution of what we've been doing. It's sort of the way we're going to use the web in the future, right? And it's going to be a little different. I'm going to say anyway that it's going to be a little different than the way we have used it in the past. So what was the past? Well, first we had static. Remember static websites? You just get a page and that's all you got. There was no interaction. You just navigate between pages. Then we've got dynamic web, the Web 2.0 that we're so used to today, where we actually have an interaction. The content of the page we see might actually be produced specifically for you based on what that website knows about you as a visitor. And if you've signed in, if you've logged in, if you have an account, they may keep a history of what you've done, and they're going to present things specific to you. Amazon.com, things like that. And then finally, we're going to be moving, I believe, to a new model, the agent-to-agent conversation, where instead of a user going to a website and looking at a page, even one that's been prepared for them, we're going to have our consumer agent, an assistant, if you will, talk to an agent on the business side. And they're going to have a conversation back and forth. Come on in, folks. And they're going to have a conversation back and forth. And your consumer agent would prepare for you a summary and a page. So the page generation of what you see as a human is going to happen here, not at the other end. And it'll be much more personalized, much more in line with your needs and requirements. Okay? We've got lots of seats over here, folks. Loads of seats on this side. Okay, so consumer agents. Let's talk about consumer agents. Basically, consumer agents are software that work on our behalf to accomplish, different tasks. We can break those into three categories, probably more, but three main ones. Research. Go out and find a bunch of information for me. Summarize what you find. Okay, we're already seeing that with ChatGPT, deep research, things of that nature, right? And then you have negotiation. This is kind of the new thing where your consumer agent on your behalf might negotiate with a vendor to get you the best deal. Okay, and then finally organize your life. Get your time back, right? So that you have a calendar and it's actually putting you on, putting events on your calendar and so on. Yes?
So if both parties are knowing everything, how's that negotiating going to work out?
Annoying?
No, they know.
They know.
Whatever it is that they're discussing.
That's where we're going with the rest of the presentation, exactly.
Okay,
yeah, we'll get there. And in fact, that's a really good question. If we don't cover it in detail, we'll come back to it because that's a great question.
Yeah.
So basically, what are we trying to do here is sort of categorize an assistant as doing some tasks for us. It might do other things, but those are the usual ones that I see. Business agents, on the other hand, have a different set of tasks. They're providing information, support. They're making offers as part of that negotiation, and they probably are doing some processing in the background, things that you would actually initiate usually as a human going to a website and starting a process, maybe ordering something. An agent on their end would do that for you on your behalf. Okay? I'm going to give you a quick example, really quick example. Let's say that you are trying to book a trip. This is agent-to-agent trip booking, where the human says, hey, book me a flight to Orange County. And it says, okay, here are your flight options. And you say, I like that one. It says, okay, you're booked and it's in your calendar. It should be this easy, right? Well, it's not. It's really actually kind of complicated. Let's talk about what that first step looks like. So when you say book me a flight to OC, it needs to know a lot about your current situation and your preferences to do a good job of satisfying that request. It needs to know where you are, where you're booking your flight from, in this case Salt Lake City, what the current date is, your preferred airlines, your seating, what point programs you're on, all those sorts of things. So at the end of the day, it can actually take the information from the airlines and make an intelligent summary of what your best options are. So what's it going to do? It's going to call out to each of these airlines and say, hey, my client would like to know about flights on this date from here to here and so on with these preferences. They're a member of your miles program. Are there any special deals? Da, 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 da. And it's going to come back with a list of options and present that to the user. And you, the user, can look at that and say, oh, I like option 1 or 2, or hey, wait a minute, what about? So it could go many times. This could be an iterative conversation where it's kind of dynamic and fluid. When you finally book option 1 in this case, it's going to go ahead and say, oh, okay, I'm going to communicate with the airline that you selected, and I'm going to go ahead and set this up. And wait a minute, it's spending your money. You better trust this guy, right? And then finally, once it's booked, it's going to put it in your calendar, and maybe there's some other associated things it might need to do, like it knows that, hey, you like to have a limo to the airport, whatever, those kinds of things. So it doesn't stop at just this one transaction. There may be associated transactions around it that it would know to either ask you about or do automatically based on what it knows about you. Okay? So finally, just to summarize, it should be this easy. That's where we want to get to. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time. So let's talk about business stakeholder benefits here, because this isn't a talk about the engineering of these agents. It's a talk about the influence on the businesses selling products and services and on the consumers. So benefits for stakeholder, the business side, CEOs want to say, hey, I'm doing this great stuff. It's going to improve our shareholder value. We're demonstrating vision, all those kind of wonderful things. The chief product officer wants to be able to produce more products and services that are interest to people they're trying to sell to, right? You want to increase your product line depth and robustness and breadth. The CIO wants to do it without introducing a whole lot more infrastructure. So their question would be, how can we do this without spending $1 gazillion on new, systems? And the chief operating officer wants to do this where the new revenue or existing revenue is not offset in the negative way with too much cost. So it needs to be done in a cost-effective way. And finally, the CMO, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is a different way of marketing, right? You still do branding. You want your name out there. You want people to know who you are. But sending out a flyer with, hey, I got a special deal, that might not be the way you do it anymore. Because it's not about trying to get eyeballs to your website. It's about getting agents to your agents, A to A. Okay, so traditional engagement channels, I argue, will become less relevant. So that means, do you do email marketing campaigns? Do you do things like landing pages? Do you things like SMS? And as you can see here, direct mail, phone, search engine optimization. All those things become less relevant over time. And so businesses have to think about, hey, if I want to embrace this business agent to consumer agent marketing channel, how am I going to do that? And what rate am I going to do that? Where, just say you have the same marketing budget, you're going to start changing the slice of the pie, right? You're going to start allocating money to the new marketing channel. And that means you're going to spend less on old marketing channels. How much do you do, how quickly becomes quite an interesting argument and discussion among an executive team, right? Plus you have to look at the limitations of your business, technology available to you, the in-house talent, external talent. All those things are going to make the adoption process either successful or fail. There are going to be people that fail at this, right? Yes?
So are you saying that if we're using AI, we're going to lower our cost basis in our production, either our products?
I'm not saying that. No, you might actually, best case, you probably aren't going to spend any more than you currently spend. But you could. But if there's a corresponding increase in your market penetration, increase in your sales, right, or customer retention, or lots of the other key performance indicators that we have, then it's worthwhile. But I'm not saying it's going to be less expensive. LLM usage is very expensive, so it's a real cost. But here's an example. When you talk about email marketing and you talk about direct mail, which I've done a lot of over the years for casinos and whatnot, direct mail is the most effective way of getting conversions, but it's extremely expensive, like $1 a piece. Email costs almost nothing, but it has a very low impact. So which is it going to be? Yeah.
And compare that to live streaming. If that is, when you say email marketing, it's live streaming.
Yeah, let's put that question again to the end because I want to get past the presentation part and come back to that one. That's a good question. All right, so disruption. Consumer agents will become the primary engagement target. They're a replacement for eyeballs, right? So when you think about that, how do you go about prospecting? How do you go about qualifying? How do you go about getting the conversion? Right? Does the catchy tagline matter anymore? Right? Because that was all about getting the eyeball. Does the, big sale make a difference anymore? Or does the ability to do individual negotiations matter more? So these are fundamental questions in terms of how you sell products. Preparing, educate your team. Yeah, you got to know something about this. If you're going to go and re-architect parts of your business, you better go in with your eyes wide open. Next is, ideate. I think that it's important that we don't stay in a rut if we are in one. A lot of businesses I've worked with over the years have built a business model that works really well, or they wouldn't be in business anymore, right? And so they're motoring along and they're doing the same thing. They're making modest, very small incremental enhancements to their business. They don't usually make big changes. For good reason, that's dangerous, it introduces risk. Here, they're being asked to take on a new challenge. They're being asked to, tread new ground. And that's an important difference. We've been here before. Remember that static web? I can remember, I'm old enough, that, hey, you need a website, why? I'd have to reduce my, regular marketing. I couldn't do my Yellow Pages ads. Who cares about Yellow Pages anymore, right? So that kind of, hey, we got to think about this. We got to ideate. How is this going to impact our business? What are the things that are going to change for us? How are our competitors going to do things differently? How will we respond to that? And then finally, you have to budget for it. To the question before, is it more expensive, less expensive, the same? You're just reallocating your marketing budget? It all depends. That's going to be changed. It's going to vary by business. It's going to vary by what kind of, comes out of your ideation. Do we want to be a leader in this space, or are we just going to do what everybody else has already shown works, right? Execution, some advice I would give you is avoid vendor lock-in. It's really easy to jump on the promises of a new and upcoming company or one of the current leaders. But this stuff is all moving so fast that very few of those people who are considered leaders today will actually be leaders tomorrow. People ask me, what's the best LLM? And I say, what, this week? Right? Because it changes every week. I think it's also important to have realistic expectations. If your business model itself is threatened by this advance in technology, doing well on the marketing A-to-A side is not going to save it. Right? So you need to make sure that whatever your current business model is, the fundamentals still make sense. I'm only talking about how you interact from business to consumer and consumer to business, not whether or not your fundamental business, it may change. It depends on the business you're in. Watch your competitors closely. Some of them will move it quickly and they'll make mistakes. Learn from their mistakes so you don't make them. I'm not saying delay so long that you don't get into the game and you miss the wave, but watch out for there's rocks over there. That's not where I want to catch the wave, right? And finally, it's really important in all business endeavors to have key performance indicators that let you know that you can go back and look at and you say, look, when we started this, we were going to measure our success on these factors. Have we met those goals? Are we doing better than we expected or worse? And it's not a matter of finger pointing, it's a matter of taking that information and using it to make the next set of decisions with a greater degree of understanding, right? So KPIs are always good. So business agent basics, dynamic matching of products to consumer needs. I've done a lot of machine learning models over the years to help businesses do these kinds of things. And I always like to use 3 factors: actionable, relevant, and timely. Art. Okay, so the idea is that if you know a lot about a consumer, you can find out whether the product that you have is something they could actually use. Is it actionable? You don't sell car seats to 16-year-olds. Not usually, right? Okay, maybe 20-year-olds. Relevant, is the product relevant to their lifestyle, their particular needs, You don't sell Corvettes to young moms. You don't necessarily sell minivans to people experiencing their midlife crisis. You have to know a little bit about who you're selling to. That's relevancy. And finally, timeliness. if, for example, going back to the car example, maybe somebody's in the habit of updating their car every 2 years. So they always buy a new car every 2 years to trade their old one in. If you know that about them, then you know it's time to reach out to them. All right? And you know that that's somebody who has done this 4 or 5 times in a row. Therefore, they're more likely to do this. That's a higher qualified lead than just tossing it out in the wind, hoping that somebody snaps it up. And we talked about negotiation, and I think it's going to replace traditional promotions. You know the coupons you get in the mail still today? You get the coupons. Or, you know, the Black Fridays or whatever. These kinds of things are meant to drive eyeballs. Well, we're talking about eyeballs going away. And finally, we got marketing aggregators becoming relevant. I didn't say data aggregators, marketing aggregators. What is a marketing aggregator? Somebody like Expedia. What do? They spend a lot of marketing dollars to bring a lot of eyes to a website where they've aggregated offers from lots of different hoteliers and airlines and whatnot. So people are getting a benefit from that service. But if you have an agent that can go and talk to every one of those hotel agents individually, can go and talk to every airline individually, you no longer need somebody like an Expedia. So they will go away. I don't think that business model is long for the world. Yes?
What companies are already doing this?
We're starting to see bits and pieces of it right now. There isn't a company, and I don't think it'll ever be a company. I think it's going to be an ecosystem that grows. So we're talking about an enabling technology that is moving toward a new reality, right?
Anyone doing it yet, though?
Bits of it. We're seeing dynamic matching of products and services, something we've been doing for years. We just haven't been doing it agent to agent. Like if you have a casino loyalty card.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so you got 4 of them in your pocket then, right? All right, so on the back end, what they do is they know everything about you that you've allowed them to keep, which is all your playing history, all your stay history, everything else. They use that to figure out which offers to you would make sense to get you to come back into the casino. So that's an example of that already being done. They do a really good job of it, okay? So we're talking about taking that level of understanding of the customer and moving it into a broader, part of the system of customers and consumers and businesses interacting. Yeah.
Norton antivirus.
Pardon?
Norton antivirus.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. So let's go to the next one. Why is it not doing anything? That's weird. There it goes. Why did it go all the way to that? All right, so monetizing the agentic web. So this is aimed at people in here who have businesses or are building tools for businesses. And what I wanted to do here was just say, okay, on one side we've got the business. So what are your objectives? Market share, retention. Yeah, you don't want to lose. For instance, if you're rollicking business and you don't get in this wave and your competitors do, how much of your business are you going to lose? So do some analysis, figure that out. Is this a real concern or not going to affect you at all? Upsales. This is cool. I'll give you an example again from the hotelier industry. When you use something like Expedia, hotels.com, the hotelier's interaction with that guest does not start till they walk in the door. Not because the hotels don't want to reach out earlier, it's because it's a real pain in the ass. And in some cases, the systems don't even let you do it because they own the customer until that customer arrives at your door. So what we're talking about now is that you can move that in, your agent's talking to them, then you could start doing an upsell or arrange their trip so it's going to be that much better from the very get-go. Love to do that. Lowering HR costs. Could be that you spend a lot of money on salespeople. Do you do a lot of phone sales? Do you do a lot of, hey, customers always have a whole lot of questions before they buy your product because it's a complex product, right? So there's that HR element. Lower marketing costs, to the question earlier, maybe. And then finally, no marketing aggregator expense. And again, hotelier.com. The aggregators are providing those deals that are posted on those marketing aggregation sites at a discount, rack rates and whatnot, right? And there's a slice that marketing aggregator gets in the middle. It goes away. That means that they can now offer you, the customer, a lower cost for their product and service. Now, on this side, the agent side, for the consumer, subscriptions, maybe even free subscriptions that are paid for by the folks trying to sell to you. Wouldn't it be cool if you had a consumer agent that for you as a consumer was absolutely free? Why shouldn't it be? Why shouldn't the people that are trying to sell you pay for that? Right? Or at least offset some of the cost. Because that's going to be expensive. It's extremely costly to run these LLMs. It's not a modest cost. So if every consumer bears that cost directly, that's maybe too much for them. But if it's free and it's paid for by the people trying to sell, then yeah, it's better. And in the middle, there's a whole bunch of infrastructure that we're going to see develop over the years. We're going to have authentication services, because authentication is going to be a big deal in this agent to agent. You can imagine. Authorization, what can the agent do for you and on your behalf? The business agent, I'm thinking we need a central registry. You need a phone book. Who are you going to call, right? You need a phone book so your consumer agents know who to call for information on certain kinds of products. And then finally, you've got things like data aggregation services, personalization, and maybe even revenue share and some marketplace for allowing the consumer agents to request information and in exchange for that request get some share of the revenue, that kind of thing. There's lots of different ways this model could shake out. All right, so we've kind of gotten through the presentation. I'm going to open it up for questions. I actually have a microphone.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
My question is can you make the online person be Tim, be me?
I'm sorry, what does that mean? You
I've
mean a personalized avatar?
I've been in the same business for 30 years, right? So I have a way to handle my customers. Can we make the online person be like me to like
There are
talking to
companies
the
that,
customer in person?
Short answer is yes. There are companies that are specializing in both creating very lifelike voice interactions along with the avatar so that you can actually have agents with personality. And that agent could be on the consumer agent side, or it could be that if you just phoned up a company, you're starting to talk to an agent and it's...
I see what the problem is my customers, when I'm visiting my customer, you have to talk to them, right? You have to see where the problems are and how you can fix their problems, right? So if I go visit a customer in Florida or whatever, and just walk through the hotel with them, right? They tell me I have a problem with that device, I have a problem with that device. We tell them how to fix it, right? So that's a sale. So I made a sales call over here downtown Las Vegas the other day, and the people showed me something they needed fixed. They said they couldn't get it fixed. I told them how to do it, right? So.
But how does that translate to a question in regards to this?
You gotta have somebody, you gotta actually make a physical sales call to the hotel, right? You have the people in front of you. Can they do that online? Can Tim be the avatar?
So I don't know, but can you imagine you're on the phone with somebody, the customer is on the phone with you, and they just sort of take a picture or whatever, and so you could do it all online? I don't know.
Yeah.
We have another question here.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. I guess we'd have to...
To the point of changing business and
Yes.
With all this different agent-to-agent talk and the HR costs and the marketing costs, it has been affecting that because people lose jobs in departments en masse. And then if you were to say take over a new department and you're looking at your budget, you now know technically you don't need that many people to get done the same amount of work because of the ability of using AI. So have they at least looked at how they're going to address the massive job losses, like once this does become a widespread thing?
Such a great, that's one of the hottest subjects in the whole, what is the impact of AI going to have on us as a society?
And,
how many people are displaced? I mean, yes, and it'll be at least as big as the transition in the 2000s away from the US being a manufacturing powerhouse to being a consumer economy. Nobody knew how that was going to turn out. We lived through it. But at the end of the day, those manufacturing jobs aren't here anymore, right?
Yep.
So what's going to happen here? I don't know. I know that this is going to be, I say I know. I don't know. I'm
currently, the reason why I was saying that is I'm currently going through it, long story short, I took over a department for a larger company, and they wanted me to staff it with 5 people. Me knowing what I know about more like corporate safety management, I know we do not need 5 people. So I told the president to close the requisites. So that directly affected the idea what my budget did. And then unfortunately 5 people didn't get jobs, but I knew I kind of didn't need it as a new leader.
Yep. Another question? Oh, here we go.
Hi, Richard. I'm Richard.
Hey, Richard.
So my question was, I could see this very, very useful to people that maybe they're shopping for a car and, hey, I want to spend this much. I want to know the interest rates right away. Now I have this avatar that could actually negotiate for me, find the best interest rate. If I'm looking for a Ford Focus, 2018 and newer, three specific colors, now nationwide, like I don't have to negotiate with these people. If it's LLM to LLM speaking, they're gonna know exactly who's gonna offer the best interest rates right away, who's gonna have this specific car right away, and it's gonna be. I personally think it's gonna be a kind of race to the bottom for a lot of these kind of people that rely on disinformation or hoping that people don't kind of figure out that, like, hey man, this bank actually offers a lower interest rate than others.
That term, race to the bottom, is a great term. So what do you mean by it?
That if you're not optimizing your language learning model for the specific thing that consumers want, for example, like if they're looking for the cheapest interest rate on a car they're about to purchase,
okay,
they're gonna go to exactly who's gonna offer that 3.2 interest rate instead of like the 4.1.
Well, if I have a consumer agent and I can tell that consumer agent what things are important to me, right? For instance, using car example, it might be the purchase side. It might be how easy that purchase can be effected, how I can get the best deal. A lot of people buy cars based on that. But the flip side, maybe you're not as price sensitive and you're looking for the best fit for the car from a firm that offers the best maintenance, right? So your agent could do the research and say, look, what is your buying criteria? It could be other things as well. I want a local dealer because I want to be able, I want dealers that are in my immediate area so I can get it serviced easy. So all of these things together create a picture that agent can then use when it's doing the negotiation. And it can provide you, if it's a good agent, I would suggest, with a summary that breaks it down like, well, okay, you've got these options. This option set is good for local dealers. This is the best price I can get. Here are the options. Well, it's not quite, you're going to maybe deal with some people you've never dealt with before or whatever, but you can get the car, but it's going to have to be shipped to you. All of that stuff can be dealt with by an agent that knows your personal, preferences in terms of buying.
And I think there's a huge potential for like the people that are kind of like not interested in negotiating or showing up to a dealer and just getting scammed. Like obviously they treat women different than they do men when they show up to a dealer, to a mechanic place.
Sure.
So
Sure.
now the agent is gonna find me the best price. I'm not gonna talk to anybody. Either the car's gonna show up to my house, or I'm just gonna go pick up the keys and not talk to anybody, and it's gonna be negotiated.
Yeah,
for
I just
me.
had that with my daughter taking her car to a reputable dealer and
that's all
taking
I got.
advantage of it. So she said, "Hey, Dad, come help." Okay, here we go. Come back to you.
So this thing can, it looks like it could just handle everything. Okay, you came on my website, you got an email, then you're gonna get hit with the retargeting ad after this, and then you came back on.
No, you're not. That's the whole point. There's no ads anymore. Remember that the ads, that budget for ads has gone down. They're relying on your consumer agent to reach out and find out information. So a lot of I bought one thing and I see the same thing in the sidebar for the next 2 weeks goes away.
That's done, man.
Right? So at the end of the day, I think this is a boon for consumers because all of the communications that come to you will be more personalized, more on point, and you could even say to your consumer, don't bother me with anything except what I say I'm interested in.
Is it gonna talk to you? Is it gonna call you up and?
All of those are possible.
Okay.
I mean, some people would like it to talk, some would not. Just give me a text summary. I want pictures. I want you to talk to me at 3 times speed, whatever. I mean, all those things are just different UI tools that can be employed. Can you pass that behind you?
How extensive is the work that has to be done on the back end to train a business agent to complete certain tasks for you? And what's the pathway forward? Do you have to continually update its knowledge base or continually update your prompts to keep it engaging with your customers the way that you want it to?
That's an excellent question because it gets to the heart of the quality of the experience, right? So if you have a very static business, your product line doesn't change often, you can have even a static website and you'd be fine, right? But the more that your business is dynamic, maybe you have different products at different times, maybe you're able to provide pricing differentiation, in different seasons, things like that, right? So if you have, then it gets more and more complicated. And we've seen that in dynamic websites. They are often optimized to reflect the best offers that can be made to consumers at different times of the year, or consumers that have complementary products and so on and so forth, right? So what you're really getting to is, well, how much do agents have the opportunity to do a better job than even a dynamic website? What would that look like, right? And I think that, yeah, there's certainly an opportunity. Is it going to take some effort? Yes. There are a couple of things that I would just call out as, elephants in the room. One is that what if the LLM starts to hallucinate and makes up stuff, right, with a consumer? That's not necessarily good. I've had salesmen do that for products and companies, right? I don't want my LLM doing it. So you need to put some guardrails in. You have to be very much assured from a business perspective that the LLM agent that we're talking about, the business agent, is actually going to do a good job, not compromise your reputation, not create problems. And that's going to be, I think, what sets apart the different vendors. Their ability to bring to the table that assurance that, yes, my business agent will never misuse any personally identifiable information that's provided. Because you can get in trouble for that, right? It's a financial issue, there's a risk. This agent will never hallucinate and offer something to a customer that we don't sell or we can't, satisfy, right? Those kinds of things. So that will be one of the questions I would ask as a business person trying to implement some of this technology. Can I go through this checklist, and can you assure me that I'm not taking on undue risk just to get this feature? So risk management is a big deal. And how hard is it going to be technically? That'll vary a lot in terms of the specific needs of each business. I think that now it's kind of hard. A year from now, it'll be less hard. A year after that, it'll probably be everybody does it. Just like when we moved from static webs to dynamic webs, it was hard at first and it got easy because a lot of the tooling, a lot of the practices, a lot of the performance indicators that we would look at, a lot of those things became just, everyday things. There were lots of people who knew how to do it. To answer your question?
One quick question. With the guardrails, is it as simple as, adding a line of text saying, do not do this? Or
no.
Is there a way for the agent to work around a guardrail?
This is called the alignment problem in AI in general, and it's we're making traction on it. The models are getting better at being told to stay within the guardrails, but I wouldn't call it a done deal. I think that once the shine is worn off of the shiny new tool that we have, we'll see that there are some places where the models need to improve so as to reflect the business risk abatement issue for their use in all kinds of different businesses. There was a question right in front of you there. I thought there was. No? Oh, Mr. Ritchie has a question.
We currently have this model. It's not to the extent, but God forbid you got to look at my mug, but we have an avatar that is me, and it is so realistic, it's crazy. So I have a robotic fitness company. We're expanding locations, but I also have a website behind it. So we're going to offer everything that I screen, custom nutrition, and as long as that data, we put the data on the website, my avatar is an expert in the data we have on the website. It doesn't go outside. Eventually, we may be able to go outside and refer you to others. So if you ask me about custom nutrition, I'm giving you the answer that I would want you to get because that information is behind on the website. Mm-hmm. So eventually, we'll have two other people, much prettier than me, that will be experts. If you're a female and you want to talk to a female about fitness or you want to talk to them about nutrition, you will talk to that avatar, and the avatar is as real as me sitting here. So there's a massive amount happening in this space right now. And then one of the things that we're doing is, we constantly research. So every time a study comes out about nutrition, we're actually adding that to the website. So eventually there will be a doctor that we employ, but you'll talk to his avatar. So anything that we put in the background of that website, he can feed you information about that, and you're really talking to, you're getting the information we want you to have. And then one step further with this, we do blood work. We do 100 biomarkers for blood. We're doing gene expression testing. And when you get your evaluation, it's going to be a live doctor that you talk to. But in the future, the avatar is on your phone. So you could be at the store and you can say, hey, I'm going to buy this product. Is that a good idea? And the avatar of that doctor who looks real will basically give you feedback, and you're talking to that same person, so you can maintain a relationship without that one doctor having to talk to 50,000 people at one time. So this is happening very quickly.
James, a question for you too. One of the earlier questions about, well, what does it take to build something like this? Did you start out with a fairly substantial budget around this? Were you surprised at how much it cost, or were you pleasantly surprised how little it cost? What was your experience on the cost?
I have a marketing group. It's one of my advisors, and they're building out this massive network, and it's part of that. So we're not doing all of the development of it. Essentially, it's going to be longevityshopping.com. If you go on there, you can see the example of the avatars. But what it's going to allow us to do is I'm handling all of Las Vegas. So at some point, I can go to that website and I can say, I want the vitamin D3 machine. I want a red light therapy bed, this brand. So all of those brands are on my website, and I'm the expert talking about those.
So it wouldn't be a big leap from where you are, which is basically a human talking to that website, to transitioning all of that AI stuff to a business agent that would talk to consumer agents. So you guys are well positioned to make that incremental leap, right?
Yeah, right now we're controlling, if it's on the website, like when we put products on the website, we've got all the data behind it, and we're not going out on the internet right now and pulling in information, except very generally. We tested it. I went to California last week, and I'm testing someone else's avatar while driving. The guy next to me is holding it up, and the avatar said, make sure you keep your eyes on the road. We want you to have a safe trip.
I love it. Yeah.
And it knew that I was driving, but we let it go outside to get some general information, but we're not going out to get medical information or anything that's, I guess, fact-based.
That's great. Did we have another question? Oh, yeah. Oh, to your right, there's Josh. Well, we'll come back to Josh. Okay, here you go. The other Josh.
So there's seems to be there's a nuance between agents versus LLM. So can you explain, will a business agent, do they have to build an LLM, and is that again cost prohibitive to those, or are we just building an agent that's leveraging LLMs?
So the term agent, on the consumer side first, and I'll talk to the business side. On the consumer side, that would be comprised of at least three elements. One is a profile database of your needs and preferences. That's not part of the LLM, right? And it should be proprietary. And then the next part is it's making calls to LLMs to facilitate the process, probably using MCP servers and all sorts of other emerging technologies. The third part is some way for it to find and talk to business agents. There are other pieces I'm leaving out, but those are the three really big pieces, right? So a consumer agent is much more than just an LLM. An LLM is being used, it's a service, but it is not the agent itself. On the business side, we're doing something similar. Now, a business agent might be as simple as an expert system that was generated by an LLM. That would be one way to put the guardrails that we were just talking about in place, because all those rules are fixed. And so it knows how to respond to a certain fairly large number of questions with appropriate sets of answers, but it's not designed for general chat, right? It's basically information completion as opposed to chat completion. So on that side, the agent isn't just that LLM, it's that those set of rules may be generated by an LLM, or maybe it's an LLM being used, but it's also tying into all sorts of resources within the company. What we think of as RAG, right? Retrieval augmented generation and things like that, where we're reaching in and pulling information out from lots of sources. For instance, to go back to that negotiation example, how do I do that? Well, I need to know what my cost basis is. Need to know what my, minimum margin is. I need to know how the taxes work in different regions. I need to know a lot of stuff. So it's going to go pull that stuff out of databases. And that information is not static. It's going to change, right? What are the tariffs this week? So at the end of the day, it's going to go through and pull all that information out, and it's going to apply some rules. So there's some business rules in there. There's some general heuristics around communication with the consumer agent. There's rules around what kind of negotiation latitude it can have. Does it need a human sign-off before it actually fields a final offer? All those kinds of things. So there could be a whole lot more than just an LLM on both the consumer and the business agent side. It's just the LLMs allow us to do things that normally a human would have to be involved with to make some of the decision process, right? Or to gain information, or aggregate and make use of large amounts of information that would normally take a human many years, months, years, whatever, to accumulate and be able to sift through. We're really good at that, right? These are what these AIs are currently good at. They're not really smart. They're just really good at aggregating a lot of information and drawing value from that. And we use that in our business process. That answer your question?
Thanks. So you may have answered the question. So how do we get to, I guess, what we call this minimum viable product piece? So I'm working now on my first AI, just doing, 1,000 pictures to distinguish between dogs and cats.
Okay.
Right? So when we use these business agents, what have you heard about how quickly you can get to a point of it being a minimum viable product without having to be, say, the best in the world? You just need to be a subject matter expert in the products that you're offering.
Limited domain breadth, right? Yeah. Okay. There are so many people that I've been talking to doing so many cool and interesting things. And when I talk to them, I'm a technologist, been doing it for like 40 years, so I sort of have my yeah, but hat on. And I listen to what they're saying and I think, okay, what about? And I ask them questions. And what I'm finding is that many of the people that I have personally talked with that are building agents of various kinds are reasonably competent, but not always fully informed. And that they're making the same kinds of mistakes technologists have always made in terms of not necessarily mapping the full business requirements to the actual functionality of the software. But I am finding as well that LLMs themselves are now participating in the process and helping clarify those requirements. And I often say to them, look, have you actually run your requirements through an LLM and ask it for, hey, have I missed any requirements? What other ancillary kinds of things should I be? What are the edge cases that I haven't thought of? Those sorts of things. And I don't get blank stares. They go, oh yeah, that's a great idea, or we already did that. So I think that there's a high level of competence, but I'll come back to my comment earlier. Things are moving so darn quick that I wouldn't really want to bet on any one of those technologies. So I wouldn't, what does that mean from a business perspective? It means that I'd want to use some industry standard APIs as much as possible so I could slide out different solutions, right? Bring in another solution that's more effective later on if one rises. I'd want to make sure that I didn't sign contracts that locked me in for really long periods of time. I'd want to have the agility to move between vendors so as to chase the lowest cost. Those are all just basic business things. Don't forget those just because it's a shiny new toy. And none of these guys out there are doing anything that other people can't do. I mean, there's not a lot of IP, intellectual property, like patents and whatnot, that are restricting the access. I mean, anybody can sit down and write a consumer agent or a business agent. They don't have to invent new IP. It's all there. It's sometimes a lot of work, but it's not something like you have to, a new algorithm or something now. We're talking about just basically journeyman kind of work. Did that answer your question? I think so. Okay. We have another question? There we go. Josh at the back here. He's been waiting patiently.
So partially just an observation about, so Tim, and I find your take on agents stimulating and interesting because it's so I'm going to point, there was a gentleman that had said 5 people became without jobs because of not being needed or something like that. So I'm going to jump in on that just real briefly. So I'm a wartime CEO. There's peacetime CEOs and there's wartime CEOs. Peacetime CEOs like to keep things going the way they are, limit expenses, all that other great stuff.
Okay.
So a peacetime CEO is going to like the idea of AI for stabilizing workflows and simplifying things, and then they're going to work the business operationing to a point where someone like a wartime CEO is going to come along and eat their lunch. Because the other alternative to that is saying, well, if we've got 5 staff now that we don't need, what could we have them be doing to be growing the organization's goals, right? So now that we're enabled, we've already got the horsepower, let's take that extra horsepower. And I just bring that up to say, I think as we're looking at the future of work over the next 3 to 5, maybe 10 years, a lot of folks are looking at the jobs that can be eliminated. Well, the excavator eliminated a lot of shoveling jobs, and that's probably for the better of all of the shovelers, the bricklaying machines, all these other things. So I think when we're looking at AI, one of the things that's sort of strange is it's also interesting to think about all of the excitement moving forward, but there's a company here in Vegas called the Fax Store that still operates facsimile machines, and that industry should have been dead a very long time ago.
A long time ago, yeah.
I cannot for the life of me believe that this exists. Of course, our federal government has a role in this. The IRS likes fax machines for some reason, so we're going to keep that. But, you know, all that to say, when you're looking at agentic workflows and you're looking at these advanced technologies, one, we can take some comfort in the fact that old industries still exist. There's some things that are just going to be around forever, so it's not like we absolutely have to change. And two, with these advantages, when you're looking at, to speak to the gentleman over here, when you're looking at building your new tools, and the gentleman up front too, actually, like there's a lot of pieces of tools out there already, and almost think about it like with the open source world. You've got, like, go down to Home Depot, you get a bunch of different parts, you build your own shed.
Legos.
But you can, yeah, exactly. It's like Legos. And so you've got APIs you can tie into the LLMs to do some of the fancier stuff, but then you can go back to the more basic computing, and then really, you know, you've got huge cost savings there, and it also helps deal with hallucinations and drift. So if you're starting off by having the AI agent say, here's this tiny set of information to think about, it can focus on it a lot more than if you don't tighten it up. Anyway, those were my rants.
Great. I think there was a question in front of you.
I have a microphone for someone who would like it. Oh. Oh.
Yeah, sure. I'll get it to you in just a sec. First here, and then I'll come back to you.
Hi. So, you know, I've found like coding agents to be really helpful just when I'm trying to work on different websites,
sure,
that type of work. And sometimes I've, you know, had my parents ask me about, oh, it'd be good if I could, you know, figure out what celebrity this is on TV. And they have, like, I guess, Google Lens, which is an AI app, but it has a hard time identifying that. And when I asked, you know, the coding agent questions about, oh, hey, can you analyze this image and give me information about, you know, the actor, and it just had a hard time. So I guess for me, something I've noticed that's difficult is just when you're trying to translate image information to text.
Yeah, but taking your specific example, Amazon, they solved that problem. You go to a movie, you stop it, and all of the characters that have been in the previous or subsequent frames, they're listed below. How did they do that? And they do it very accurately. It's because they invested in the image database of all those actors. They know the list, the cast. So they've simplified the problem. They said, oh, well, we know that it isn't all of these other people, it's one of these small lists, so it's a much easier matching process. So at the end of the day, you know, when you think about the difficulty of problems, sometimes it's the way you frame the problem.
Yeah. And I was just curious too, like if you had any strategies just over the time you've been involved with AI on addressing those problems of like, oh, how can I strategically like do that?
I think what we just talked about is a perfect example of that. Is reduce the complexity of the problem, don't overshoot, and reset your expectations.
Okay.
Right? And a lot of times you use the term minimum viable product. Sometimes that's all you need to be able to compete with your competitors. You don't necessarily need, you know, all the bells and whistles. So reduce the scope of the problem to suit the requirements of the business, you know, that you know, whatever the business application is that you're trying to do. That's
Yeah.
probably the one piece of advice that I would give people. And I've been doing machine learning for many, many years. And it basically, when we bring all these different tools to a problem, it's more about stating the problem in the most appropriate way that leads to a good result, right? What do we want? What is this data? How much can we trust it? How can we get rid of the fluff? With the remaining data set, what are the kinds of questions we can answer? Which of those questions are actually valid for the business need? Sometimes you start with the business questions, but often that's, you kind of work from both ends. Because sometimes the people in the business will say, I need to know, and they're asking for something you don't have, you just don't have the data. You can never answer that question.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, matching those two ends up, making the problem definition as small, focused, and precise as you can. So that's the answer I would agree
Okay.
with.
Yeah,
Besides
thank
you?
What industries do you believe this will impact most? All of them?
Well, I just throw this out here. We have. Thanks. So the question was, what industries would this impact the most? I would say, well, what industries did the web moving to, first static and then dynamic websites? What industries weren't impacted? I mean, right? Almost all of them. So a very large percentage. I think this is going to be one of those cross-cutting, pervasive, complete, regime change moments. Just like when the cell phones hit, changed everything. Just like when the internet hit, changed everything. So I think we're going to see quite a big difference. Come back to you. Go ahead.
Thank you for referencing my earlier point about the 5 people not getting the jobs. Because to the point is, I didn't feel the need to spit out the entire business plan. But what I'm saying with that is, as a new leader, I'm educated enough to know we can get our brokers and our current TPAs to do this work with the AI agents that they have. So I don't need those 5 salaries or benefits or days off or issues. However, that is going to increase the hiring on our HR side for our intake coordinators.
Oh, there you go.
So it's not as though...
So the job's moved. It's
so
just
the
like,
idea of it is, as a leader
Yeah.
within my silo, you have to understand how to run your silo within the greater industry. So
Right.
that was my point of, I'm telling someone, I know you want me to employ 5 people, but I'm not going to do it. Like, it's not smart business.
So you can save that money and spend it elsewhere. to
Absolutely,
increase your
and
business
we
software.
save the money for the initiatives that are going to now be created with the massive orderings and restructurings we have to do. We now have 5 salaries, including benefits,
Yes.
and don't let them get hired in the state of California, because now we have HR issues. So that was my furthest point, to go a little bit further on it. You're right. Jobs will be affected on the front end, but that's your job as a leader to be able to identify that, who you can leverage your needs on, and where you can reallocate the resources to keep the jobs. The issue is, what to my further question to you was, how do we educate people on that greater understanding?
I wasn't my takeaway from your first question, but it's a great question. I'm glad you brought
Thank
it
you.
up. Yeah, it's one of those things that I don't have an answer to. I don't know. I think conversations like the one we're having here help educate people. What I wanted to do was focus today on, hey, how is your business likely going to change in terms of the marketing interaction with consumers, right? That other conversation is a whole nother talk, and I'm not sure I'm the right person for it. I think, who was, yes, I'll come back to you.
So properly understanding the agent-to-agent paradigm that you're describing, I see an overwhelming, immediate number of applications in the business-to-business space. And
In B2B.
In B2B,
Yeah,
but
sure.
you're also describing
I didn't
B2C.
talk about that, but that's absolutely,
Yeah, you're describing B2C, and so I'm curious if you think it's going to be feasible or realistic to avoid vendor lock-in. We're seeing movement already with things like Google Gemini being included in Pixels, for example. So any existing lock-in that may be present is going to be forced on the consumers generally, and then, I mean, you're going to have an agent in your pocket, and I think that
Or
has...
6.
Or 6, exactly. And so having to reconcile, I know that the biggest concern that a lot of these AI development companies are facing right now is the consumer space adoption, right? It is the cost of performing these kinds of incremental improvements on the models is enormous. And so finding broad marketability for that moving forward means things like Google Pixels having Gemini and iPhones having their equivalent, or Claude and GPT being included in everything you use. So if it's going to be put on the hardware, I'm curious if you see it being a situation where you can feasibly switch between models at will.
I don't know. That's not my space. I'm not really into that. I have some cursory knowledge of it, and my takeaway is that it's all moving so fast that, I mean, just the other day I was reading a paper where they're talking about new LLMs that take 1/100th the space, not just quantization, but literally they changed the way the model works. So it's not just the usual inference engine, there's another layer in there. And if that was to pan out, suddenly models become a lot less expensive to run. What does that do to the calculus? So anybody that would have answered that question you asked a month ago wouldn't have had access to that paper. What I realize is there's just so much advance in this space that, maybe we're not going to have to crank up a bunch of nuclear plants just to power LLMs.
But we should crank them up anyway.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm just giving an example. So at the end of the day, there's just so much going on that I wouldn't feel comfortable even taking a wild guess. I do know, just from experience, and I think everybody in the room has probably lived long enough to have seen this, that it's surprising how much we can do, how quickly we can do it. Moore's Law is still alive. It was supposed to be dead 15 years ago. It's not. We're down to 0.2 nanometer. Okay, we're there, that kind of thing. And now we're going into the light-based chips. Wow. So, I don't know.
A lot of other projects are letting you use multiple models too.
Yeah, I do that.
The way that we're building now is in mind with, let's always be open to plugging into something else later.
Plug for cursor there. Okay. We had another question. All right. Go ahead.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for the presentation. I think today sounds like it's more around business operations and marketing, but my question is more around compliance, SOC 2, like how much does a new business owner working with AI, like how much do they need to know to be dangerous or at least to prevent some of the landmines?
I don't think anywhere near enough attention is being paid to that question. I have patents in the PII space, and I've worked in fintech, so I know about regulatory compliance. I can show you the scars, but at the end of the day, I think that's going to be one of the areas that most of the pain will come from. So it's a great question. Right now, I just want to tell people, pay attention, ask the questions. Don't just accept at face value that, this is going to be a wonderful thing. It might not actually be a wonderful thing if you use it incorrectly. So not a great answer to your question, but we had one more, and I think we'll make that the last one. Go ahead.
Just kind of give this talk about like wartime CEOs and CEOs and all this talk on it. They kind of reminded me that as business people, we're going to have to be looking to what's going to be happening in the future. And if we're thinking about the present, we're probably already going to be steps behind on it.
You don't want to be behind the curve.
Knowing not where is it?
Yeah.
All right.
So with that said, like I don't know if some of you might have seen The Matrix, but there's like a scene in here where he's kind of bending the spoon and they tell him like you're not bending the spoon with your hand, you're bending it with your mind. So the business is gonna have to do the same thing. You're gonna have to bend your business model around what's going to be happening.
We need an LLM that can bend spoons. Okay. All right, guys, thank you so much. And we have lunch.